FIFA is on track to make this the richest sporting event ever staged, nearly $9 billion. And it won't save the American economy. That's 3 days of interest on the national debt. 3 days. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is where the money did land. Because the cities that hosted this aren't counting a windfall. They're bracing for a bill. Record revenue and municipal losses at the same time. That's not a contradiction. It's a design. Let me show you the machine. Before a single ball was kicked, FIFA projected $30.5 billion in economic impact. Host committees repeated the number. Politicians repeated it. The New York Host Committee announced its forecast by ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Then New York City's own comptroller sat down and ran the numbers on his own city. His estimate? About $70 million in city spending on security and services. And at best, $55 million in new tax revenue. That's a loss. In the biggest market in the country. In the city hosting the final. And before we go further, one rule. Keep 4 ledgers separate. FIFA's books, the city's budget, the hotel's revenue, and the whole US economy. Those are 4 different things. Every inflated impact study works by blurring them together. A hotel raising its rates isn't a city making money. We'll keep them apart. So this video answers 2 questions. If nobody built a stadium, and the crowds actually showed up, where did the money go? And why can't a record-breaking payday move the American economy at all? The answer to both isn't corruption. It's more boring than that, and far more effective. It's a contract. Start with the story you already know. In 2014, Brazil spent around $11.5 billion on its World Cup. About 85% came from public money. It built 12 stadiums. One, a huge arena in Brasilia, sits in a city with no major club. It ended up parking buses. That's the white elephant. The monument the public keeps paying for after everyone leaves. And here's the surprise. America didn't build one. Not a single stadium went up for this tournament. The first World Cup since 1994 where that's true. Every venue already existed. Mostly NFL stadiums. Now, existing doesn't mean free. Every venue had to be converted. Natural grass, wider pitches, new media facilities. But those are small bills. Millions, not billions. They don't explain the whole. Then look at Toronto. It built no new stadium either. Its council-approved World Cup budget still climbed to 380 million Canadian dollars. 6 matches. That's over 60 million a match, before anyone counts a hotel receipt. So the bill didn't vanish with the concrete. It moved. No construction debt. No arenas left to rot. And the cities still lose money. Therefore, the leak is somewhere else entirely. Once you see where, you can't unsee it. Here's what changed. For most of World Cup history, a local organizing committee ran the tournament. It absorbed the costs. It also shared the upside. Not this time. FIFA runs this event itself, dealing directly with the cities. FIFA keeps essentially all of the revenue. Media rights, sponsorship, ticketing, hospitality, merchandise. The cities get the costs. Their contracts put them on the hook for overall safety and security, and for all taxes, duties, and levies. They get no cut of ticket sales, no concessions, no merchandise, no parking. That's a franchise. The franchisee pays to run the business. The franchisor keeps the receipts. It wasn't always like this. Meet one man. In 1994, Alan Rothenberg ran U.S. soccer. Back then, the federation paid for security at the matches. Cities took a slice of the game day money, the food, the drinks, the stuff sold inside. They took in more than they spent. Hosting made money. Today, Rothenberg sits on the Los Angeles Host Committee. Same man, same country, opposite contract. And here's his verdict on it.
Everybody signed an agreement that was very, very one-sided.
Some cities read the terms and walked away. Chicago walked, Minneapolis walked, Glendale, Arizona walked. Rothenberg again, from inside the tent. A lot of people are looking at Chicago now and thinking they were the smart ones. And you can read part of this yourself. Texas forced Houston and Dallas to release their contracts. But the cities were allowed to black out the key figures, including how much FIFA pays to rent the stadiums. So the public built the stadium, and the public isn't allowed to see the rent. Most host cities are spending between $100 and $200 million each. Congress put in $625 million in federal security grants across all 11. Economist Andrew Zimbalist has studied these events for decades. His conclusion is blunt. Cities carry the costs and receive essentially zero revenue. And when the bill lands, somebody has to carry it. New Jersey Transit had to run extra service to MetLife Stadium. The cost? $48 million. So it announced a match day round trip at $150. The normal fare is $12.90. The transit chief said it plainly. This isn't profit. We're recovering $48 million. After a backlash, the fare came down to $98. But notice the pattern. The cost doesn't disappear. It just picks a door. Los Angeles kept its fare at $350. Atlanta at $250. That was paid for by about $100 million in federal transit grants. Either the fan pays or the national taxpayer does. Together, the 11 face a shortfall of up to $250 million. But hold on, the crowds are real. More than 5 million tickets sold. Somebody is spending money. So maybe tourism closes the gap. Before we get there, one more thing about those free stadiums. Of the 30 stadiums that host NFL teams, only 3 were built entirely with private money. The rest took public subsidies. American taxpayers have put roughly $33 billion into sports venues. Those buildings carry corporate names. The money behind them was public. So FIFA arrives. It rents a publicly subsidized stadium for 5 weeks. It keeps every dollar that comes through the gate. That's the transfer. Nobody needed to build a white elephant. The white elephant was already standing and already paid for. Now, cities were told they could cover their costs by selling local sponsorships. In theory, fine. In practice, FIFA locked the market categories for its own global partners. A city couldn't sign a convenience store chain because its food sales overlapped with McDonald's. One account described organizers reduced to pitching local dry cleaners and mechanics. The tax side runs the same direction. FIFA's host city agreements require tax exemptions for FIFA and its related entities. And in June, FIFA secured a deal with the U.S. Treasury, letting national football associations claim tax-exempt status on their tournament earnings. Players still pay, states still tax, but the organization at the center pays remarkably little. Tickets ran from $60 to nearly $8,000 for the final. And every one of those dollars goes to Zurich. Not one reaches the city that hosted the match. This is the trickle-down everyone was promised. It doesn't trickle. It's fenced off. So, the tourists. This is where it turns, because the data is already in. The hotel analytics firm CoStar tracked occupancy across host cities during the tournament. Nationally, U.S. hotel occupancy rose 2.4% year over year. In the host cities, it fell. Of the 11 American hosts, only San Francisco and Dallas gained. Kansas City dropped 24%, Seattle 15%, Atlanta 13%, Toronto and Vancouver fell too. The rest of the country was busier than last summer. The World Cup cities were emptier. Prices went up anyway. Hotels earned more per room. They just sold fewer rooms. The hotel industry's own survey found around 80% of hoteliers in host cities tracking below forecast. Between 65 and 70% pointed to visa barriers and geopolitical tension as a drag on demand. International visitors are the engine here. A New Yorker who buys a ticket is just moving money around New York. The visitor from Munich is new money. Fewer of them came. Take New York. Its hotel association forecast a $300 million bump. With one match left, it now expects about $100 million, 1/3 of the promise. Economists have a name for this: displacement. A mega event doesn't only pull people in, it also keeps people away. Regular travelers see the crowds, the closures, and the room rates, and they book somewhere else. And here's the part that should stop you cold. We've run this experiment before. In this country. Before the 1994 World Cup, boosters promised host cities a $4 billion windfall. Afterwards, 2 economists, Robert Bod and Victor Matheson, went back and checked. They compared host cities to what those cities would normally have done. The result? Income growth came in $5.5 to $9.3 billion below trend. Not below the promise, below what would have happened anyway. The worst performer was Orlando, home of Disney World. Its hotels were already full every summer. Soccer fans didn't add to that. They displaced it. And it isn't one study. Research from the University of Toronto looked at the last 14 World Cups. 12 of them produced net economic losses for their host regions. A 2022 review covered 43 Olympics and World Cups. More than 80% cost more to stage than they generated. Everyone who bids knows this. They bid anyway. Now the other side's strongest case, because it has one, and it's better than you'd expect. America genuinely avoided the worst trap. No white elephants. The risk got spread across 3 countries. San Francisco and Dallas gained. And their psychic income, the pride, the packed squares, the shared experience, that's real. It isn't nothing. And I've been imprecise about one thing. Cities don't write these checks directly. Private, nonprofit committees do, funded by sponsors and donors. Houston's committee says it plainly. Not a dollar from the city or the county. But read the contracts and you find a hole. They never say who pays if a host committee comes up short. That's the line nobody signed. But here's the objection that should bother you most. Most of FIFA's $9 billion was never American money. Broadcast rights are the biggest slice, around $4 billion. European networks pay that. Asian networks pay that. Sponsorship money comes from global brands. That cash was never sitting in a US bank, and no American policy could have captured it. So if anyone tells you the World Cup drained America's wealth, they're wrong. You can't drain money that was never yours. Concede it fully. It changes nothing about what follows. Because the honest question isn't what FIFA made. It's what the public put in. So let's add it up. $625 million in federal security grants. About $100 million more in federal transit grants. Up to $250 million in shortfalls the 11 host cities are carrying. Plus state money on top. Texas alone runs a reimbursement fund. Round it generously. Call it $1 billion of public money. And I want to be honest about that number, because it cuts both ways. $1 billion is not a national crisis. Against a federal deficit of $1.9 trillion, it's a rounding error. It's about 8.5 hours of interest on the national debt. Which answers the question in the title, and not the way either side wanted. This tournament was never going to save the American economy. It was also never going to sink it. Anyone selling you either story is selling you something. And that's the trick. The national frame is the distraction. $1 billion is nothing to Washington. But remember that 100 to 200 million per city? To a city budget, that is not nothing. That's a police line. That's a transit line. That's a school. The World Cup was never a national fiscal event. It was 11 municipal ones. The money moved at exactly the level where it actually hurts, and where almost nobody was looking. So call it what it is, but call it precisely, because precision is the whole point. That $98 train ticket isn't a transfer. That's a fan paying for a real service. Higher hotel rates aren't either. That's a business pricing a busy week. The transfer is narrower and much cleaner. It's a stadium the public subsidized, rented out for a month, with the gate money leaving town. It's a contract where the city carries the costs and takes no share of the revenue. It's a clause that blocks a city from selling the one asset it had left. That's the machine. Record revenue and municipal losses were never a contradiction. They're the same fact, read off 2 different ledgers. Small on a national scale, decisive on a municipal one. And none of this is history yet, because the next contract is already on the table. In November, FIFA awards the 2031 Women's World Cup. The United States leads the only bid. That decision was due back in April. It slipped. And reporting says host cities now want better financial terms than they got this year, which hands them something they've never had. The receipts from this summer land before the next signature does. So those final accountings aren't trivia. They're leverage. Toronto promised one. New York's comptroller will publish his. Set them against what the committees promised in the spring. That gap is the whole story. And it's public. And remember Chicago. It read the contract in 2018 and walked. It isn't on the 2031 list either. Rothenberg's words again. A lot of people think they were the smart ones. Because the forecast always arrives with a press conference. The receipt shows up quietly, months later. This time, somebody's watching for it. Part 2 comes when those numbers land. We'll check every figure in this video against the real ones, including mine. Subscribe if you want the receipts.